Hi, my name is Celeste Duffy, and I'm a professional illustrator and artist in California. And I'm super excited you're here to take this class called Procreate Picasso, because in it we're going to be using Picasso style to paint our self-portraits. And by doing so, we're going to dig deeper into Procreate to really learn how to get visual texture and a lot of the techniques in your traditional art practice into a digital realm so that you can really bring some more dynamic visual interest texture to your digital art practice. Particularly if you're already a traditional artist, it's a great way to learn these tips and tricks can really help you bridge the gap between your traditional art practice and your digital art practice. So grab your things and we'll get started, and we're going to dig in to make our Picasso self-portraits. So the first thing that you're going to want to go ahead and do, if you don't already have one, is to take a selfie, a self-portrait, because we're going to use this just as a reference. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't need full hair and makeup, but maybe, you know, if you had a favorite shirt or you want your hair up or down, maybe go ahead and take the time to make that effort. But otherwise, you're really just kind of using it as a guide. That's all. So don't be too precious about it. Just go ahead and grab your smartphone or your tablet, and let's take a self-portrait. So I'm going to go ahead and include shoulders up. Usually most of his portraits or his figurative work was, I'd say mostly at least, you know, from the waist up. And usually the sitter was, his muses were sitting in a chair. There were minimal background elements, but some. So you could also choose where you did your selfie. If you wanted to use a high back chair or anything you can think of that's really going to make it personal and ultimately meaningful. Okay, all right, so go ahead and grab that selfie, and I'll see you in the next section. Okay, so I've gone ahead and split the screen with my photos, my reference photos, because I wanted to go ahead and have some Picasso available just for inspiration. And I really liked when he did his compositions like this, a little bit, you know, with two sides of the sitter's personality, perhaps, you know, different perspectives. That was really one of the exciting things and what was quite new about Picasso in his day. So I'm keeping that off to the side as a reference. You can see down below there's other options, this kind of composition, as well as he worked through the eras and experimented with his own compositions. So go ahead and find some of his work that really inspires you with regards to how he broke down the form, because there's, you know, he had such a long career, decades and decades of work, that there's really just so much to pull from as inspiration. But basically speaking, we're going to go ahead now, and using the select tool, we're going to go ahead and divide up our own faces to achieve that kind of composition, that reference. Okay, so I'll see you in the next section. Okay, welcome back. So we're going to go ahead and launch our Procreate, and let's go with a new canvas by clicking the plus sign up here on the right. And I'm just going to go with about a paper size A4 with a 300 DPI, which means I'm going to have a really great resolution, a decent size, you know, paper size, you know, something around this size, so that if I ultimately did want to go ahead and print it, I'm not going to have too bad a loss of quality if I kind of stay those physical dimensions. And then if I want to export it into digital for distribution electronically, I'm still pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead with a portrait orientation just because it's a portrait. And I'm going to navigate by clicking this tool here, insert a photo. And I'm going to find my favorite selfie that we just took. And I'm going to go ahead and deselect it there by clicking off of this arrow sign. Okay, so now we have imported our photo. And I'm going to go ahead and duplicate my layer by dragging, and I'm going to turn off and lock my original just so I have it undisturbed should I need to go back to it, because we're going to go ahead and hack this up to achieve our composition, our Picasso inspired composition. Yeah, so go ahead and place your self-portrait wherever you like on the canvas, the scale. Usually he, you know, with his portraiture, his figurative work, it was usually pretty much centered. You could do something, you know, off-centered a little more with a little more visual tension, but for the sake of this demonstration, just go ahead, I'm going to go ahead and leave it centered like that. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and get all Picasso-ish and go ahead and select our features and reorganize our face. So, okay, welcome back. So you have your reference off to the side. I'm going to go ahead and go with this. I think maybe one of these ones down here. So I'm going to keep this as a reference, as a guide, just as inspiration. And I'm going to go ahead now to my own face, and I'm going to start selecting my features by select this tool here and make sure the freehand option is selected down below, and go ahead and select the feature that you want to work with. I'm going to trace around my eye. Doesn't have to be perfect. And then I'm going to move it using the move tool here, and I'm going to reposition it, possibly scale it a little bit up, drag it upwards, and then I'm going to click off of that, and that's in place. Don't worry that there's a hole, that's fine. This is just for compositional reference. We're not going to worry about painting this or that hole. We're just repositioning it, that's all, so don't worry. Go ahead and select your other features. Select my second eye. I'm going to go ahead and move it again with this tool and scale it up. Maybe a little bit to the side, something like that, and just carry on with each feature until you're satisfied with your composition. Let's do that a little bit. Sometimes it won't let you move it if it's a little bit too small. It's kind of a little bit frustrating, but just keep working with it. I like a petite nose, so I'm going to go ahead and probably just leave it there, and I'll probably leave my mouth in place. So that's just kind of a rough start. Go ahead and play with your own face. Again, don't worry, we're going to put our line work on top of this and turn this off, so you're not even going to see that anymore. It's just really for you to try to explore iterations of composition until you really find one that expresses your personality, you know, just, and also aesthetically you find very pleasing. So again, don't worry, you know, about destroying your own photograph, because you have that original below. So you can even, you know, this is one iteration of composition. I can turn that off. I can go ahead and duplicate the original again, and you know, try it again, and try maybe 3 or 4 or 5 versions of it until you know, really push your limits. You know, really exaggerate your features, because there's absolutely nothing, you know, you're not wasting materials, you're not wasting any paint, you know, you're totally just experimenting at this point. So be brave and just go ahead and take the time and have patience and keep exploring. You know, with scale, with even maybe, I might even explore with just elongating the neck. So a super long neck, maybe, yeah, I think I might actually go with that one. So I'm going to experiment. I might do maybe 3 or 4 more, just to kind of really play and you know, keep trying things that I maybe wouldn't have traditionally thought of, that are even, you know, a combination of some Picasso inspired artwork, that kind of thing. So take your time, make a couple layers, explore, and we're going to add our line work in the next section. So as you can see, I've gone ahead and I've explored even further, dividing up my face to make a composition that I like. I'm going to go ahead and nudge that down a little bit. And now we're going to add our line work. So you can delete some of the earlier iterations if you want, or you can just keep them, that's fine. But I'm going to go ahead and lock this, and I'm going to create a new clean layer above it. So we're going to be doing our line work on a layer above this, this example. So I have also included in the materials some of these brushes that I'm using in a Picasso inspired brush set for Procreate. It's in the course materials. Go ahead and find that and install the brush set. I like to start with a pastel stick. It's called pastel stick in black, and I'm going to lower it just a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and just do a rough outline of the features. He always did a really strong, well, not always, but in these particular works, you know, really strong black outline, and that's what I'd like to achieve today too. In this example he doesn't, but there is still a strong line, almost outline of the features. So I will go back to this reference and kind of do, and as you can see as well, his line work was it wasn't solid. It was definitely textured. So whether he used, a loaded round brush, or if he did use some sort of oil pastel, I'm not entirely clear in this particular example, but something like that, with a lot of texture. So go ahead and in your own self-portrait, experiment with your lines. Whether you outline every feature. I'm actually going to go ahead and change my brush to dry hog bristle. Yeah, so that gives me some texture. And I have bangs, so I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to want to portray that. You can experiment with how detailed you want your figure to be. And you can certainly turn off your underlayer so that you can see how it's going. You can also lower its opacity too by clicking. You'd have to unlock it first. Click on the N and lower its opacity so that it's not quite so distracting. Just be sure to go ahead and lock it back though, so that you don't accidentally paint into that, because once you do, you can't separate your drawing, your painting from that layer. See, like I just did. If that wasn't locked, I would have painted into it. I think one of the hardest things about imitating his style is to make it, not quite so cartoony. And some of that, I think, in practicing this style, I found is varying your brush size. I mean, usually his brush weight, his line weight is pretty consistent throughout, but there are some, it's not truly consistent, because you can see it's lighter, thinner here. It's missing here. It's not in this nostril. There's some variation that makes it look a little less, a little less outlined. And you can do that also by varying the brushes that you do use. Boop. It's a very saturated brush. Our just general line work, we're going to go ahead and basically color in, but we're going to go through some tips and techniques to get a lot of the visual texture that you see in his work. You can see all that line work and nuance that if we were just to color in or to paint in, we're going to lose in Procreate. So I'll show you in the next section how to start getting that visual texture. Okay, so go ahead and wrap up your line work and let's get started with color. Okay, so let's talk about texture. We're on to filling in our portrait with color, and we really want to go ahead and grab as much texture, visual information as we can in a digital format, which is challenging. So to get texture, there are a couple different techniques that you can use. One of the easiest ways and the most straightforward ways is to use a brush that has visual texture in it, that has a grain. And you can dig through all the ones that come with Procreate. A lot of like the charcoal brushes have beautiful texture. There's some third-party ones that people have made that have a lot of great texture. You can certainly make your own brushes with a lot of texture. Again, I've included some in the brush set that comes with this class that have texture built into the grain of it. So this one has a canvas. It's like a 2-inch wide brush that you could fill in space with and still have that, the grain of a canvas, if you will. So that's the easiest way, most straightforward way to go ahead and get texture. And you can keep, overlapping until you get a lot of, you still have visual texture, but you have some opacity as well. There's also, you could go ahead and drag some color into a closed section like that. Again, make sure that you have an original of your line work, locked and turned off so that you have that if you needed to go back and, if you accidentally made changes that you weren't happy with, you have that. So that's one way you can go ahead and get color. You could drag, as long as the section is completely closed, you know, there's no gaps, that color will stay within this particular section. If it's open, let's go to my select tool here again, which we used when we chopped up our faces. And you can just go with automatic. And if I click on the blue, and this blue, and this blue, and this blue, it's selected all of my blue just based on color. And I can save and load that. And I think I should be able to rename it, but I don't need to because I can see the shape. So that is my blouse. And now I can go ahead in with, I think I will go with one of the brushes from this class. I really like this canvas brush. And choose an alternate color, maybe something a little darker. Something like that. So I have visual texture and it's imperfect. It's not predictable. I've done it by hand. Okay, welcome back. Now we're going to go move into the tighter areas in the face to get some skin tones and some texture into our features. I've included in the course materials a palette that has some flesh tones for you to pull from. So it just is, gives you a little bit of a head start. Skin tones can be a little bit challenging. So go ahead and find one that you feel is closest to yours. As you can see, he didn't really use like a full-on flesh tone. He used, you know, a variation of different tones and hues. So feel free to mix and match. Again, I think I would go ahead if I knew that those areas were closed, which they aren't because of this brush. You can restate them if you like. Or you could just draw into them because they are kind of little spaces and you can get nice and in there. Do use some different tones though, don't make it just completely flat. And as you probably already know, eyeballs, the sclera is never actually white. So be sure to give it some color, don't just leave it blank white. Just be sure to keep it all beautiful and organic. Perfect. Okay, well, I don't know if perfect is the word for it, but I'm quite happy with that. I like the way it looks and I like all the textures you can see from using different brushes, overlapping brushes, some masking, that kind of thing. But there's one final trick that I wanted to show you to really bring it all together in one cohesive piece, and that is using our layer properties themselves to get texture. So I will see you in the next section where we go over that. And now for the last way to get a really great cohesive texture is to use the properties of our layers themselves. So what you're going to want to do is go ahead and click on this tool here, and we're going to insert a photo. Again, I have included this with the course materials, and it's a canvas texture. This is just a real canvas texture that I photographed, and it's in the course materials, so go ahead and find that and import it into your canvas, into your file, and it's going to end up in its own layer. And so you're going to want to go ahead and scale that There's some dark, some lights, and you can just scale a section of it that you really particularly like to cover your whole piece, and just position it where you like it. It's a little bit, you know, irregular, so if you don't like that really dark mark, you can just shift it. It's totally fine. But once you have it into position, I actually do like a little bit of that, so I'm going to leave that. Position it, scale it, get it just where you like it, and now it's in its own layer and it's sitting on top of everything. We're going to go ahead and click on the N here. And here's where we have all these options. We can darken it, and you can see it really sets the tone of the whole piece. It gives it a lot of visual texture, probably just a little too much in this case. So you can go ahead and you can lower the opacity of that too, so it's not quite so overwhelming. And you can experiment with all of these other settings. Each does something slightly different. And so there we have it. There is my finished piece of my Picasso inspired self-portrait. There you go.